now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Comedian Bill Cosby, Academy Award-winning actors Cuba Gooding Jr. and Jamie Foxx, rap mogul Sean P. Diddy Combs, Guns N' Roses musician Axl Rose, and New York Mayor Eric Adams were all hit with civil lawsuits by women on Thanksgiving weekend.
More celebrities are facing lawsuits this morning with just hours until a temporary New York law expires. The Adult Survivors Act lets victims, adult victims that is, sue over attacks that occurred even decades ago. A former Penthouse magazine model sued Axl Rose yesterday, claiming the Guns N' Roses singer raped her in 1989. Rose's attorney denied the claims. In two lawsuits filed yesterday, two women accused actor Cuba Gooding Jr. of groping them in 2018 and 2019. Another lawsuit filed this week accuses actor Jamie Foxx of sexual assault in an incident in 2015. More than 2,500 lawsuits have been filed under the temporary law this past year, including against former President Donald Trump, Sean Diddy Combs, and actor Russell Brand. Trump, Combs, and Brand have all denied the allegations.
Tonight, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is fighting off an accusation of sexual assault going back 30 years. An unidentified woman filed the $5 million lawsuit on Wednesday under the Adult Survivors Act. That New York law is set to expire today. Adams was a New York City police officer at the time of the alleged incident. Today, he denied assaulting anyone. Adams is also facing an FBI investigation into his campaign's fundraising.
Now, all of these men have been hit with civil lawsuits by women alleging that they were sexually assaulted by each of these men, and all of these women are filing these civil lawsuits in the hopes of getting financial compensation for alleged sexual assaults that took place anywhere from 8 years ago with Academy Award-winning actor Jamie Foxx and Cuba Gooding Jr. possibly, and over 30 years ago with New York Mayor Eric Adams, and even longer as related to Axl Rose and Bill Cosby. Now, all of these women are filing these civil lawsuits in conjunction with the expiration date of New York State's Adult Survivors Act, which was signed by New York Governor Kathy Hochul in 2022. Now, this Adult Survivors Act goes out here and invalidates the statute of limitations that had expired as related to these alleged cases of sexual assault, and allows women a 1-year opportunity to go and file a civil lawsuit against any man she alleges sexually abused her or allegedly sexually assaulted her. Now, this whole law is one that I find to be quite suspect as related to its constitutionality. However, there was one federal judge, who I believe is a bit of a beta male, who tries to say that this law is constitutional. However, I believe if we took this same law to the U.S. Supreme Court, it would basically be thrown out, and it would be thrown out because this law basically goes out here and violates the Fourth and Sixth Amendment rights of all of these men, and it violates the Fourth and Sixth Amendment right that these men have to due process under the law. Because if someone is making an allegation of sexual assault, then that individual has to go out here and make a criminal charge in a criminal court, because according to our U.S. Constitution, an individual must go out here, if they're making an accusation against an individual, and go out here and allow that man or woman to have their day in court in order to answer those criminal charges, because under our U.S. Constitution, a man or a woman who is a citizen of these United States is innocent until proven guilty. And because they are innocent until proven guilty, the courts have to go out here and have documentation and evidence to substantiate whatever claims are made, and those claims have to be made within a reasonable time, which is known as the statute of limitations. Because what the founding fathers wanted to do with statute of limitations is say that a person has to take a responsibility if they are wronged to go out here and seek justice within a reasonable time. And if that person does not go out here and seek justice within a reasonable time, then their claim can be seen as suspect because this individual did not take the responsibility to go out here and get justice for whatever they were wronged for. And in the case of this whole Adult Survivors Act, it runs counter to our U.S. Constitution, allowing a woman to go out here and file a civil lawsuit as related to criminal actions, circumventing our U.S. Constitution's Fourth and Sixth Amendment due process under the law, and allowing somebody to try a case in a court of public opinion based on the feelings of the public, and two, try a case in a civil court where the whole standard of law is based on the preponderance of evidence and not based on a criminal standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what has me having a reasonable doubt about this whole Adult Survivors Act, because this whole Adult Survivors Act is a covert way to for women to go out here and try to re-establish the standard of trust and belief, which was shattered back in, I believe, 2021, when Bill Cosby got his conviction for sexual assault against Andrea Constand overturned and restored the standard of rule of law. And this whole Adult Survivors Act really is a law that is based on that whole twisted standard of trust and belief, a standard where a woman can go out here and want us to trust and believe what she says without ever having to go out here and test that standard in our criminal courts and be able to get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a really dangerous standard for our country to be under, because if we are under a standard of trust and belief, we are basically being taken back to the dark days of Jim Crow America, where a white woman can go out here and say that something happened to her, and a group of beta male white knights will not go out here and seek justice in a criminal court. No, they will go out here and look to go out here and give this woman justice based on her feelings. And that's basically what's happening here with these lawsuits. We are being taken back to a standard where a group of beta males are looking to lynch an individual without ever giving them a day in court to be able to answer these criminal charges and be able to go out here and answer these charges and have a trial by their jury of their peers. No, what we're doing is having women going into civil court based on their feelings about what they believed happened, and what a woman believed happened has to be something that has to be substantiated by by evidence and a timeline if you're making accusations against an individual. If someone is making a criminal accusation of an individual, then that individual, again, under our Constitution, under due process of law, has a right to answer those charges in a criminal court, and they have a right to answer those charges and bring up their own defense and their evidence, something that many men are not being allowed as related to this Adult Survivors Act, which is a law that basically gives women all of the rights to file charges, but does not make it where they can present evidence to substantiate or corroborate anything. No, everything is based on what they felt happened back many years ago, and that's not the standard of our U.S. Constitution. However, we have individuals who think that they have a right to compensation, even though the statute of limitations have run out, And that's not how I believe our country should run, because our country, again, is a country of laws, and this law is one of the worst that I have seen since the jab mandates and prohibition back in the 1920s. And it's a bad law because it allows any woman to go out here and file a civil lawsuit against any man that she claims did something to her without ever looking to present any sort of facts to substantiate any of this information. She never has to go out here and file any police reports, which are considered to be hard evidence, and that opens the door for women to go out here and file a claim without ever having to deal with the consequence of perjury. And that's one of the reasons why some of these women file these civil lawsuits, because they don't want to deal with the consequence of perjury if the evidence is proven to be a lie. That's what's dangerous about this law, next to its interpretation of law, which takes us again back to the standard of trust and believe, which is the standard that the Me Too movement had the country under from 2018 all the way up to 2021. And that's a standard we have to push back on, because nobody should be able to file a civil lawsuit against any man in this country just based on how she felt an incident happened. No, we need a standard of law that tells a woman that if something happened, she has to be responsible enough to report this incident in a reasonable time, and she has to take account of everything as related to evidence. No, a court cannot come in based on your feelings and compensate you for an event that may or may not have happened many years ago. No, a court of law should not be going out here and looking to hear these cases, because these cases are not following proper procedure for a lawsuit at all. Because when I look at the cases that are being made against men like Bill Cosby and Axl Rose and New York Mayor Eric Adams, even though I'm not a big fan of Eric Adams' policies, I can look at the cases based on the law and say that these cases are going to be nigh impossible to prove, because these cases there's no evidence that is around, just the word of this woman. And a court cannot answer the word of a woman, even though civil courts have a standard that is lower than criminal courts, where it's based on the preponderance of the evidence. How can you go out here and make a judgment based on a case where there is no evidence at all except the word of a woman? That's the critical question I would like to ask New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who signed this ridiculous law into effect. I mean, how can you go out here and be able to defend a case where there is no evidence? And how can you present a case where there is no evidence, just the word of a woman who says what might possibly have happened? I mean, when I look at this whole Adult Survivors Act, it is not only unconstitutional, it is also leading to the filing of many of these frivolous lawsuits. And again, these lawsuits, as I see it, they really have no merit, because you have to have evidence to present, not just your word. But that's not stopping many women who saw E. Jean Carroll get a big judgment against Donald Trump based on her word. And that was a really bad precedent, because, again, people were making precedents based on feelings about Donald Trump, not understanding we have rule of law, and you cannot go into a court, whether it be civil or criminal, without hard evidence. And that's the bad precedent that's set with trust and believe, because trust and believe is a very dangerous precedent that lets women go out here and make claims against men, and make those claims against men in an effort to either incriminate a man and put him in prison for the rest of his life, or make an allegation that can cost that man his professional reputation, his job, and his freedom in some cases. And this is why we have a constitutional standard of due process under the law, and we have to go out here and push back on this whole policy, because this policy is one where women make allegations without any substantiation, and that's again a dangerous standard because it puts every man in jeopardy. Even with this whole thing having an expiration date, any woman can file any lawsuit at any time based on that whole policy. And what's to say they don't decide to bring back another Adult Survivors Act, because the whole foundation of this law is deeply flawed. It's saying, oh, people can file within a year for these cases, but then there are women who will go out here and say, oh, I missed the date, I didn't know it was happening, and this could lead to somebody saying, I missed the date, so I want to go out here and file a case. So this whole law's foundation is deeply flawed, and just as deeply flawed as prohibition, because it opens a floodgate to trust and believe that makes it where no man's financial security is safe, and no man will be able to maintain his finances because he has to fear a lawsuit from any woman based on her feelings. And again, she won't have to go out here and be accountable to standards like things like the statute of limitations, and she won't be able to be held accountable for going out here and filing criminal charges within a reasonable time. Now, the whole idea behind this law is based on feelings is all about trying to compensate victims, but the whole thing is that a victim is somebody who has to work towards becoming a survivor, and part of becoming a survivor is you have to take responsibility for your actions. Now, I myself was a victim of violent crime back in 1989, and the whole thing is, even though I was a victim of that crime, where I got robbed of a leather jacket, I had to start taking responsibility for my life in the aftermath of that incident. And part of taking responsibility for your life is you have to do things that move your life forward, where you start taking charge. And this law basically makes it where women don't have to take responsibility for their actions. No, they can go out here and rewrite history to make it like what they say happened based on their feelings, without ever having to take responsibility for the facts inside of a criminal court, and have this defendant be able to deal with these charges and be held accountable for those charges. No, it circumvents this to get a fiscal compensation, which really is quite questionable to me, because if somebody is out here committing sex crimes, some of the worst crimes in the criminal justice system, you would think you would want to get this individual off the streets, and you would want to get this individual off the streets so that no other woman could suffer like you did. That's what I would think most women would want to happen. But this Adult Survivors Act makes it where they want financial compensation, not criminal justice. And that's where I have an issue with this law. You want fiscal compensation, and you want fiscal compensation for a criminal act, but don't want to give that man a day in court to defend himself. Moreover, I find this whole list of individuals who have been given these civil lawsuits to be quite suspect, because while we have many prominent celebrities on this list, most of them are black, like Bill Cosby, Cuba Gooding Jr., Jamie Foxx, and New York Mayor Eric Adams. And there are several names that I would find that I thought would be on this list that seem to be omitted, such as Les Moonves, such as Woody Allen, such as Stephen Collins, and even the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. I find it quite interesting those names aren't on this list for this Adult Survivors Act, and that those adult survivors aren't going out here and going after those individuals. However, these women will sit there and say, oh, I didn't do anything in the past because men like Bill Cosby and Jamie Foxx were so powerful. However, when I look at the men who are off this list, such as Woody Allen and Les Moonves, who basically was running CBS and allegedly had connections with the LAPD to keep cases from coming back to him. I find it interesting those names aren't on the list in New York and California, where this Adult Survivors Act is in place. I find it quite interesting those names aren't on this list as related to all of these civil lawsuits, which again I find to be quite questionable, because these civil lawsuits basically are ones that are being filed, I believe, primarily in order to get an out-of-court settlement, because if these cases were actually taken to court, a judge who was objective and understood the law would throw all of these cases out, not just because of the statute of limitations, which is being invalidated here by this, I believe to be unconstitutional law, but because there's no way to corroborate any of this evidence with documents, with witness testimony, with DNA evidence, with anything to substantiate or corroborate any of these cases. Even on the weak standard of preponderance of evidence, there's still not enough evidence here to present these cases and present these cases in a way that shows a logical timeline as related to events taking place, as related to these alleged assaults. Now, I can look at an example of this with Jamie Foxx, where one of these women says an incident took place in 2015, and that incident taking place in 2015 is a suspect one, because this woman is alleging that this took place a year before the Me Too movement was building momentum, with allegations that started with Bill Cosby. And you would think that if the Me Too movement was going on, this woman would be one who would have made her claim early on, but she waits until the Me Too era is over, and even after an allegation was made against Jamie Foxx, which was proven to be basically false because the woman backed away from it once it was found that her head was in a place that she could not be in without it being there, but voluntarily. I mean, this whole case, again, quite questionable. Same for the one with New York Mayor Eric Adams, the cream of wheat, man. Again, I'm not a fan of Eric Adams' policies, but he is a U.S. citizen and has rights under our Constitution. And to say that in 1993, this man did something to this woman while he was a transit police officer, you would think that this woman would have reported this man to internal affairs, because a black police officer who, even though he was a president of the union of that whole thing, he basically would have been somebody they would have looked to take out. So I'm listening to that case, and it really doesn't have any substantiation when I look at the context and the timeline. And I look at the timeline, again, internal affairs would have dealt with this very quickly, and internal affairs would have taken care of that whole situation. And when I look at the case of Bill Cosby, again, I'm looking at the timeline and the evidence. And when you start looking at these types of details of these cases and don't go on feelings, but you go on the timelines and the evidence, you start to see that a lot of these cases that are going to be filed are going to fall completely apart, but they will cost an individual lots of money to go out here and try to defend. So what many will try to do is go out here and offer up some sort of settlement, and that's what these women basically want in the short term, not seeing how they're going to damage male-female relations in the long term. Because what the Me Too movement did was it destroyed male-female relations in this country. And with the verdict against Bill Cosby, this basically started making it where men didn't want anything to do with women, and they didn't want anything to do with women because a simple allegation could cost a man not only his professional reputation and his job, but it could also cost him his freedom. And this whole series of lawsuits under a civil law makes it where those men have to be afraid to have any sort of social interaction with a woman. And that whole standard of law, again, the reason why it was tossed out is because it makes it where men and women cannot even socially interact. Moreover, it makes it even where men don't even want to hire women, or if they do hire women, they put them in separate facilities to avoid having to deal with civil lawsuits like this and having to deal with sexual harassment lawsuits or sexual assault lawsuits. So this is a very bad law that creates a bad precedent, and it's going to destroy male-female relations, where we have right now a social marketplace where most people aren't looking to either be social or try to market for interpersonal relationships. So this law basically destroys the entire dating marketplace because men see what's happening to these older men, and they don't want to get involved with women because they fear that if they even try to approach a woman, what's going to happen is either this woman is going to file a criminal charge against him for a crime that possibly did not happen, or he's going to wind up in a civil lawsuit where a woman is looking to go out here and get financial compensation for something that did not happen. So that's why these laws are not only unconstitutional, they are antisocial, and this type of law, again, does just as much damage as in some cases, as abusers, because what it does is it makes it where regular people don't want to socialize because they fear they will wind up being prosecuted for crimes that did not happen or possibly couldn't have happened because somebody was in their feelings. So this whole case, as related to all of these individuals, is quite scary because it takes us back to the standard of trust and believe, and the standard of trust and believe is a scary one. It's a scary one because, again, a man basically has to live in fear of a woman making an allegation without any sort of substantiation and looking to get a payday just based on her word, which should not be our standard because our Constitution fought, our founding fathers fought against this in the Revolution, because this is the kind of standard that King George established for America when it was a colony. And it was the standard that the Ku Klux Klan stood by as related to protecting white women. And their protection was basically looking to go out here and give women the power to terrorize black men, mostly. And this whole standard, again, is a very dangerous standard set by this whole law. A law that is basically goes against our Constitution, goes against everything about America, goes against everything about our rule of law in America, and somebody really needs to take these cases to the Supreme Court where they should be thrown out, because these cases and this whole law in and of itself goes against everything that America stands for. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them in other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today.